warm welcome to AWS Summit Singapore. Um, I'm going to introduce to you Veeam for this topic of backup data protection in the AWS cloud. I want to give you a brief intro of Veeam to help get that started. You might have heard about Veeam from the birth of on-premises backup. We had a great story. We're over 10 years old now with millions of workloads made available with Veeam and a net promoter score truly fanatic from customers like you and others around the world. So we're in this transition to the public cloud and data management in the cloud, and we're going to tell you that story today, how you can apply that to the Amazon cloud. So what I'm going to walk you through today are really three families of capabilities for the AWS cloud. It's a natural choice cloud today, by far the market leader, and you have many options. Whether you're moving to the cloud, you want to leverage the cloud as part of your IT practice, but then once you're in the cloud, how are you going to stay available? And that's something that Veeam can help you with. So flipping that around, cloud data retention, cloud mobility, and then AWS data protection. That can help you no matter where you are, whether you're lift and shift, refactoring, migrating to the cloud, or even net new stuff in the cloud. Veeam can help you every step of the way. And we're going to show you how these different technologies work, including some demos. Now, I'm going to come back to these, and I'm going to break all three of these down in the time we have today. So I'm going to start first with cloud data retention. Now, cloud data retention is one of the most natural ways to start leveraging the cloud. In fact, before I joined Veeam, I was a blogger. I think in 10, 12 years ago, I used to say that this is actually the natural first step, putting backups in the cloud. While we're quite a bit forward of that now, it still is a great way to start. So let's first identify the challenge. Now, the challenge of cloud data retention is really built on explosive data growth. And when I say explosive, these are problems you and I deal with every day. You know, we have situations where we have so much data that we have from new applications, additional applications, modern types of devices that are going to make all kinds of data that we need to make available. So this growth is unprecedented. And on the other side of it, we're really stuck from a compliance standpoint. And when I say compliance, I'm like, what do we need to keep? How much do we need to keep? Who decides that? And that's actually very difficult. A lot of times organizations don't know how to answer that question. How much do I need to keep? So you have these kind of two factors going kind of in different directions. A lot of data and this need to keep it potentially for a long time. Now we have industry data points that tell us that customers want to reduce storage costs. Now I say storage costs. That's more of an on-premises storage cost, which leads us to that almost most of the customers believe that the cloud is the real only way to do that. And I firmly believe that as well. You'll clearly see that the cloud becomes the natural choice to do that. So we align here at AWS Summit to the machine learning track, right? There's, I think, 4 different insight tracks. This one's the closest to what we do. And Veeam's actually recently published some research around the machine learning track. Now you'll see I have a QR code. Don't take this one, stay till the end, because I have a QR code that actually has this whole slide deck for you and the demos I'm going to show you. But anyways, the important thing to note is that these trends, whether they're machine learning or data protection and more, the common thread here is the Amazon cloud, and you can have a good availability experience. So with the cloud data retention kind of theme, how do I start? Well, you want to lower those storage costs. And like I said, it's more than just the cloud storage. It actually starts either on-premises or even other types of cloud storage as well. And you also want to introduce this notion of tiering data. And this is where it actually starts to get interesting. When you have this kind of conundrum where you don't really know, I should say, I won't say you always don't know, but you have this kind of debate of how much data to take. The reality is for backups, what really matters is the most recent part. From performance, from where you restore most, etc. This longer tier, where's the natural place for that? It's the cloud. So with the notion of tiering and these storage cost pressures, the real idea here is that this needs to be a simple and easy solution. And I'm convinced it can be, additionally transparent to what you do. So this is how we've implemented this particular technique. Now, I realize not all of you are familiar with Veeam, but what I want to introduce you here is the stuff on the left, the blue stuff. That can be on premises, that can be in the cloud, that can be in a different cloud, doesn't really matter. But it's basically block storage. Now, the way Veeam writes backups, and I'll kind of spare you too much of that detail, but we kind of land those backups first stop on a traditional file system. Now, that being said, we have a desire to actually store this data in the cloud from those factors I just illustrated. One of the techniques to help us get there at Veeam is the scale-out backup repository. Now, the scale-out backup repository is a software-defined mechanism that combines multiple storage types, including the cloud, to meet your needs. And so what happens here is I have this kind of element of storage, and I can back it into the cloud. So I'm going to put my backups backed in the cloud. So how exactly have we done this? Well, we'll take backup data. Now, I don't expect each of you to have too much knowledge about backup data, other than I'll say it's generally big. If you think about unstructured data, photos, files, usually smaller. It's not uncommon to say that this green file is 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, 4 terabytes, etc. So what we've done to leverage AWS S3 storage is basically kind of deconstruct it from a metadata and a data perspective. So the metadata is very small, so don't let these little chunks make you think that they're proportionate. But we actually copy the metadata to the cloud. Now this is just a few megabytes. Then we take the data chunks, which this loosely aligns to objects on premises. I'm sorry, to file blocks on premises. But in S3, it's going to be objects. And so basically these data chunks are going to be shelled out into 1 megabyte objects within a bucket. So by putting the backup data in a bucket with the metadata, but we've left the metadata on premises, and then we're going to condense that. When we condense that metadata, what we have is what we're calling a VBK file shell. This points to all the objects up in the cloud completely transparently. That's how we've implemented it. It's very portable, and it allows you to keep effectively infinite data in the AWS cloud. It's actually very important to note that this is a very unique way to manage backup data. And how we position that difference is, one, is that those offloaded backups stay as shells with metadata, and it's also a local cache. And what I mean by that is if you have some of the data on the traditional disk and the bulk of it on S3 storage, if you have it here, it'll read it there to save you any transfer costs. But it's completely transparent. So things like bringing the whole virtual machine back, bringing a whole file back, you really don't need to know where the data is. You do know that it's in AWS, but you don't have to be too worried and focused about where specifically it lives. And this block recovery, like I said, it's a block to become an object. This is very smart about looking at the most recent offloaded or non-offloaded restore point. So it's completely transparent to you, and it makes it very easy for you. Now, additionally, in regards to the difference in the market, this is, in my opinion, also very important. For those of you who are decision makers looking at, I want to leverage the cloud, I want to store data in the cloud, but the cost is always a factor. Now, I can't control the Amazon cost, but they're very competitive in the market. I can say that for sure. But what I'm not going to do, at least from the Veeam implementation, is actually charge you to use the cloud. So there are some other approaches that will implement a cloud tax or a double charge. You will not have that with Veeam, so it's very important to note. And additionally, we make this data completely self-describing and transparent and portable, so that if you were to change your mind, there's no lock-in. I'd like to say that Veeam is almost agnostic to our fault. We're so agnostic that we honestly don't care what storage you use. We don't care if it's Windows, Linux, VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix, on-premises storage. We can put it all in the cloud. Doesn't matter. So for this cloud data backup, putting backup data in the cloud, you're going to go down this path with Veeam with no vendor lock-in. That's the first thing. And I have a demo that I'm going to show you here in a second on this same capability. So cloud mobility is the next kind of level of progression to the cloud. Remember I said tiering backup data into the cloud is a great way to start, and anybody can do that. But getting into the cloud is also the next step, and it's a little bit more advanced, and it will actually lead you to the next topic of staying in the cloud as well. So there's three kind of use cases of going to the cloud. The first is just moving into the cloud. You know, when you think about, okay, I'm going to put this workload or these workloads in the cloud, how do I get them there? Also, maybe I want to do some special types of recovery in the cloud. And you also could use some test and development use cases. In fact, it's not unheard of today to say, well, I want to test this in the cloud to see if it's actually going to work. It's very possible that it'll do better than what you have on premises in the cloud, but you got to make sure. So having a framework to pick up what you have on premises, and basically this is a lift and shift, you want to make sure that your experience in the cloud is what you would expect in regards to performance, in regards to user experience, and this is a framework you can use to test that. So again, some data points. ESG predicts that in 2020, next year, which is kind of scary, they're forecasting that 23% of all backups done will be in the cloud. I think that's actually a low number. I think it's actually going to flip even higher than that, quicker than that. Additionally, we've surveyed some IT leaders, so decision makers. 47%, nearly half of them are particularly concerned about the ability to go into the cloud. Is it going to be, something that's going to keep me up at night? So we have to think about that as well. So what has Veeam done? Veeam has implemented Veeam Cloud Mobility that really takes the portability of any backup. So whether it's something on premises, something a physical server, workstation, it could even be from a different cloud. Yeah, we can take stuff from another cloud and put it in Amazon. And you can use this Veeam Direct Restore to AWS to do that. So it's actually only 2 steps, which is, it's kind of funny because it's so simple that we almost give the technology not enough credit, yeah? Because there's a lot that happens underneath to convert these workloads to EC2. So the 2 steps will allow you to recover workloads directly into EC2. Everything from business continuity, migration, you could use it as disaster recovery. It's not orchestrated, but we're working on that. And then from there, you can unlock your testing and development use case. Again, that's that gateway to leveraging the AWS cloud as your primary platform. Getting it up there, testing what you want to have happen, making sure everything functions at the level you want. And then from there, you can go forth and be available. So what does that look like? So we'll take these backups, and again, Veeam agnostic to its own fault, from wherever it might be, whether it's on premises, physical server, virtual server, my workstation that's in my bag right there, yep, that bag, I could take that back up and throw it into the cloud. You have these options today. Another cloud as well. Once they're stored in Veeam storage, Veeam backup storage, we can convert that backup file directly to EC2. Now the beautiful thing here is that it's totally wizard driven, and it abstracts you all the hard work that we did. And what I mean by that is that it converts it to an EC2 instance completely transparently. And you can also select any disk type. So if you want the SSD storage, if you want also the different image types, so the geometries, small, micro, large, and it'll give you price estimates as well. And we do this through this helper appliance. Now the helper appliance actually does all the work. It does all the disk manipulations in Amazon to save you all the work, because the UEFI to BIOS conversion, that part of it needs a little bit of help, and we're going to do that in the cloud. And one additional, very unique to Veeam capability is the secure restore, meaning we can restore to EC2 and ensure that no ransomware, no viruses, no malware are going to go with it. So you could do so in confidence. All right, so the last one I'm going to talk about is Veeam Availability for AWS. So when you think about this is actually building on a challenge of there's a lot of new stuff in the cloud. Everyone who's using AWS, chances are you're using more than you did last year and even more than you were the year before that, and next year will be even more. So there's this data growth in the cloud. And there's a lot of data points that indicate that we need to make that backup data available. And what we've done at Veeam is really based this in the cloud backup strategy, data protection in the cloud. We've based it centrally on the AWS shared responsibility model. Now, hopefully you've all seen this, but on the left in the top, the customer has the responsibility for the security in the cloud. What's the important word there? Security, yeah? Security definition, long term, I used to say that security is maintaining confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. Now that's an old definition, but it actually still applies well to security today. And when it comes to availability, that's backup. What's at the top of the blue thing? The data. This responsibility is very important when it comes to the AWS cloud. Other clouds have similar kind of perspectives. You have the control of the data. Veeam's got some tools that'll help you maintain that efficiently as well. So there's three main benefits to this approach. One, it's cloud native, agentless backups, purpose built for Amazon. I'm going to show you both in a demo and architecturally how that works. And then you can have some cloud mobility and central management options, which is very important if you're hybrid. Not everybody's hybrid cloud, but if you are, you can have that full control of all of your data. As you're migrating to the cloud, when stuff is production in AWS, when there's stuff on premises, you can see it all in one pane. And you'll have some very powerful recovery techniques. That's honestly what made Veeam a thing, is the high-speed recovery. Instant VM recovery that came out a while ago. You can actually do that transparently in Amazon now. That's a capability that's really built around this product. So how does this all fit together? So if you look at Amazon, Amazon's built on APIs, command line interfaces, frameworks like snapshots, regions and availability zones, all kinds of different services. The puzzle is kind of put together when Veeam brings in a simple user interface, lots of recovery options, file level recovery, whole instance recovery, disaster recovery architectures, visibility into where your data is, what's being backed up, and then also application consistency, which is really important when you think about the integrity of the data. And we built this offering as a combination, really, it's two products today, and it'll continue to be that way, but last year, Veeam acquired N2WS software. Piece of trivia, N2WS stands for not to worry. And globally headquartered in Florida in the US. And this backup product for AWS is purpose-built for many AWS services, and I'll show you that list here in a second. And it's a single pane of glass that sits as an EC2 instance to orchestrate all of your commands across different regions. So what's really cool to think about here is that one of these EC2 instances, which is N2WS backup and recovery, will actually direct or orchestrate all of your backups across all different zones. So you don't have to put one in every region that you have an AWS footprint. You have some file level recoveries. Actually, my favorite one is on the right here. The infrastructure cloning to clone VPCs. That's your security configuration. So if you're building a DR from this availability zone in this region to this region in this availability zone, you might want the same security and networking. We can actually help you with that. And when we look about the whole landscape of AWS, we realize there's a lot of services. In fact, it's mind-boggling. The amount of innovation that Amazon is bringing to the cloud, it's a great time to be at this event. There's a lot of innovation here, and you guys are absolutely the smart kids at this event. But when we look at all these services, again, our kind of responsibility, of backup kind of exists wherever you might be, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem or such. So all these different services, the RDS services, DynamoDB, EC2, S3, EBS, more and more. What we're able to do at the bottom, it says CPM server, but that's just the web interface that I showed you a second ago. It is able to coordinate all those backups, even across regions. So when we put all of this together, Veeam Availability for AWS is actually taking N2WS backup and recovery for all of this cloud-native backups. It's taking the Veeam technology on premises, if you have that, and it's putting it in one consistent control plane for you. And you can have your short-term backups and your long-term backups sit in the cloud, whether it's the cloud tier that I was talking about just a second ago, or a backup from EC2 directly to the long-term backup archive. So you have this incredible flexibility to have the ultimate control of your data. So how do we make this work? So I want to play a demo here of a video. I'm going to start with these videos. And by the way, at the end of the presentation, I've got a QR code that you can download the slides. The videos are embedded. So I don't have my laptop up here, but this is one way that we can make sure that the video won't have any surprises. So I'm actually going to show you now in this video how we will put backups into S3 with Veeam. So I think I hit play. And I think it will go. It always throws me a loop. There it is. Okay, because there's like 3 seconds of quiet before it actually goes. So before I click again, I want to make sure, yeah. So anyways, this is a Veeam console, if you haven't seen it before. And what I want to show you now is that I have some data, right? Here's, I think there's about 10 restore points. They're all sitting on premises. Why do we want to go to the cloud? Save on storage costs, longer term retention, yeah? So I had those 10 restore points. Now I mentioned that the storage cost, this is a small example, but this is 60 gigabytes. And again, you know, that's actually small. I usually play in a world of bigger data. But what happens here is we can leverage that Veeam scale out backup repository to kind of put that data in S3. So the scale out backup repository is a collection of different storages, and I can extend it to object storage. So let's go ahead and click that. And when we look at that object storage, what do I have? I have Amazon S3, and actually have some other options as well, including S3 compatible on-premises storage. But basically S3 is going to be the one that makes the most sense and where we're going to go with the demo. And it's very straightforward. I'll drop in a key pair, and all the global regions are supported, as well as a few private ones like the China region and the government cloud in the US. And then I'm going to put these backups in an S3 bucket. So it's a very straightforward way to say, yes, I want to put my backups in S3. And I can pick the bucket, I can make the bucket, or I can make the folder. The bucket has to be made, but I can select the folder. But I'm going to give this folder name here. We're going to call it a demo. And this is really a capacity play. We message it as the Veeam Cloud Tier, but in the UI we actually call it the capacity tier because it has infinite capacity, right? And nice safeguard. I can limit it to 1 terabyte, which is actually really important. So we can actually put the bucket in place here. And when we go into the bucket, you'll see there's nothing in there right now. And if we look in here, this is empty. Now, what I did is I set up a target, but I haven't actually pulled it into the scale out backup repository. So if we go to the scale out backup repository, these 3 kind of traditional storages is where my backups are sitting right now. But I'm going to go to this capacity tier here, and I have all 3 of them listed. And I have a policy where I can put them together, I can split them apart by performance reasons, a lot of options, irrelevant for the cloud, but what matters is right here. I can extend to the capacity tier, extend to the cloud. And this is actually going to allow me to transparently put this data into S3. And you'll see here it says move backup files older than 1 day, your operational restore window. Or if on-premises storage gets too full, let's go ahead and preemptively throw up the data to the cloud. This magic here is allowing us to transparently extend that backup data to the cloud. Now, the scale-out backup repository is that Veeam construct that's going to allow you to do this. But what I have to do is let it take a little bit of time. And what I mean by that is that it's kind of a background process. So I've told the scale-out backup repository to leverage S3. But then if I go look at what happens later on, I'll come back and say 4 hours later. It's this example was 4 hours. But what has happened here is a little task is kicked off. And this task is called Cloud Tier Processing, tiering. So basically the tier of what we were talking about is being defined right now. So it's taking a look at those disk backups that we have, and then it's doing that shell process between the metadata and translating what were file blocks to being data objects in S3. And that's happening right here, completely transparent. I don't have to do anything, it just runs. And what happens is we've actually, through the magic of television here, moved a bunch of data. And actually this was only 10 minutes and it was quite a bit of data. I do have direct connect in this particular lab. But what happens here is when I go to do a recovery, I can clearly see that the bottom half, the older backups, those are up in the cloud. So yes, from a Veeam perspective, all of my data is right here. But the depth of it is in the cloud. And remember I said we're going to save some storage space, that expensive on-premises or block type storage. Now, instead of the, what was it, 50 or 60 gig, it's about half of that. And then as time goes on, this 29 gig will stay on this type of storage, and then the depth of it will be built in the cloud, completely transparently from you. And then you have these options where you can restore it to Amazon as well. You can restore files. It's all transparent. In fact, we did a big demo the other day, or a couple months ago when we launched this technology. We did a big demo of it, and we were booting up stuff from the cloud totally transparently, and it is almost as fast as what you would have on premises. Cool stuff, yeah? It gets better. That's putting backup data in the cloud. But what about, once I've restored data to the cloud, what about stuff that's production? Well, that's where Veeam Availability for AWS can help you out. So if you didn't know, by the way, this is the #1 marketplace app for backup. And if we go in this marketplace here, we can simply just look at N2WS. Is that rain? Oh, I think it's the rain, yeah? I think it's rain. Or it's like really strong air conditioning, but I'm just going to hope it's rain. But anyways, we can find this N2WS image in the marketplace, and it sits as an image, one EC2 instance. N2WS backup and recovery allows me to add an account, which will drive these backups. And this account here, it's going to work with the IAM roles or take other roles. Pretty straightforward, and it's going to be permitted to go to certain AWS regions. So once I have that account, then I can go make a policy. Now the policy loosely equates to a backup job, but what I'm going to do here is say I want to do a demo policy. And this demo policy is going to use this account, meaning it has access to certain regions. I'm going to keep 30 generations, straightforward. Now I'm going to click on these backup targets. Now the backup targets loosely aligns to the source data. So I'm going to look for EC2 instances. What do I have in US East? And I have this Ubuntu system that I care about. So I'm going to add it to that backup policy. Now you'll also see I can do EBS volumes, RDS databases, Aurora clusters, Redshift, DynamoDB. If I'm talking to you next year, I'd love to see 6 to 7 more services down there, yeah? So once I have that data source for a backup job, I can make that S3 repository. Remember that longer term storage I was talking about? That's right here. So I can add this repository, which translates to a bucket. Now it's a different bucket than the cloud tier that I just described. This particular bucket, if I look over here, will have a name. So I've got it Northern Virginia, and this is specifically for Veeam Availability for AWS. And I'm going to keep all versions of this object in this bucket. No, I'm not going to do that, but I'm actually going to automatically encrypt. Always a good idea. And I'm going to create this bucket. So now I have this bucket specifically for Veeam Availability for AWS. And I'm going to go ahead and find it there in Northern Virginia. Yep. And then I don't need to hit encryption here because I'm encrypting in AWS. So I've got this bucket. This is the birth of the external repository. So in Veeam Talk, this is a place where we can put backup data. And when we go over here, we'll look at this policy, the copy to S3 option, and it's not required, by the way. You can be completely cloud native, and you don't necessarily need that kind of linked on-premises view. But we're going to turn that on in this example, so you have that kind of full single pane of glass of where your backup data goes. Let's run it. So I'm going to run this backup, and that was that one Ubuntu EC2 instance. And so what's happening in the background is we're calling to AWS a snapshot of that EC2 instance. And you'll see that it's running here And this is all infrastructure level at the cloud level. So you don't actually have any interaction in the guest operating system. This particular technology is very fast and very efficient. If you have hundreds or thousands of EC2 instances, this is absolutely the best way to go. And I'll just take a look here. 3 minutes and 55 seconds. That's outstanding. Everything from the backup and then an additional copy, consuming more service, but in that different storage over in S3. Completely done for you automatically. And once we have that, we'll take a look in Veeam Backup and Replication. This is that external repository. Yes, it's using S3, but it's different than that cloud tier. I'm using the same AWS account, which, by the way, you can mix it up. It's probably a good idea, actually, to have better kind of separation of access. But anyways, I'm going to add this external repository. And this external repository is going to use those account credentials. It's going to go to the global service areas. And I'm going to go into Northern Virginia yet again. I'm going to find the bucket that I had set up for the external repository and go into that folder. And once I'm in that folder, what does that do? Well, that exposes the backups that were done in N2WS Backup and Recovery to me. So once those exist in the cloud, in that S3 repository, I can start doing other things with them. So I've added that S3 bucket to Veeam here. It's 3 clicks of a wizard. And then if I go look at what is in the external repository, you'll see, and you can kind of see the yellow little icon there. That indicates that it's an Amazon workload. We have a different little picture if it's VMware or Hyper-V or physical server or Linux and the like. I can start picking it up and restoring it and pulling data off of it. If I just need a file on premises from something in the cloud, I can do that right here. I have this single pane of glass. And I can also start making additional copies of this data. I don't necessarily know if everybody wants to pull data out of the cloud, but when it comes to backups, or maybe there's a certain set of data you might want to pull on premises, you have that option. And that's what this backup copy job will do. And I always want to put that in the scale out backup repository, always a good idea. And we can do that completely transparently. So when you have this kind of integrated solution of taking these agentless backups in the cloud, and then we can move it around wherever we want, you have this full control plane that will allow you to recover your data, have visibility to your data, and to do such in the same pane of glass. And we'll take a look here that the backup copy job is copying what's in that S3 repository, and it's going to put that in a different repository completely transparently. So all of that being said, there's a lot of different approaches here. We're putting data in the cloud. I didn't actually do a demo of restoring to the cloud that direct restore to EC2, which is right there. If you hit direct restore to EC2, 2-3 clicks, there you go, and you're in the cloud. So anyways, and then I'll have that backup data on-prem. That's the Ubuntu system that was in the cloud if I wanted to do stuff with it. I see it completely transparently. So all of that being said, there's 3 solutions that I've kind of briefly overviewed for you. 1, cloud data retention. That's that cloud tier, storing the backups in the cloud. 2nd, restoring data to EC2. That's Veeam Cloud Mobility. And then the last one is both N2WS Backup and Recovery and Veeam Availability for AWS. A very powerful way that you can back up in the cloud. Now, I've given you a brief overview, but I really admire how kind of fanatic Amazon is about their customer stories. We've got them too. So you can go to these 2 URLs and hear what our customers have to say, especially by vertical and country. You can search and get a lot of information for different success stories. And then here's that URL I was talking about. And I wanted to also encourage everyone, if you want to have a chat with us, go on over to the Veeam booth, which is D02, Diamond 02. And then for redemption, we've got a little lucky draw box. You might have been given the little card. And the password for that is rick@AWS, and you'll have a good chance for a lucky draw. That's the URL to the slide deck, which includes those demos. And on behalf of the Amazon team who have facilitated us as a sponsor, I want to thank you for everything and enjoy the rest of AWS Summit Singapore. Thank you, everyone.